Hey everybody, Blu-ray here, and I got a special guest right here.
Hi, this is ThroughScorns. You know me. We did the Resident Evil 3 remake discussor video last year, I believe.
Yeah, and of course,
Yeah,
it's tradition. When there's a new Resident Evil game, we had to talk about it. It's tradition. And with,
especially me.
unfortunately, with this one, I know we're aware that's kind of a late, discussion, but life happens and stuff gets in the way, so we weren't able to do it right away as we wanted to. But here we are doing it. Better late than never, basically.
Certainly.
But anyways, we're gonna talk about the goods, the bads, and all that stuff. So I guess we'll just start off with the story of our thoughts about it. You want to go first?
Much obliged. That's what a real homie does. Just kidding. So, if you've played Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil Village takes place just 3 years after the events of Resident Evil 7, and you get to play as our protagonist named Ethan Winters, and he is on a quest to figure out what has been happening in Romania, where the game is located in Village. And so he randomly discovers this mutated virus that's spreading the population of Romania, where enemies have turned into these creatures called lichens, and they're these supernatural esque style enemies where they're not just like your vampiric, like gothic, like horror style creatures. And so his job is to find his daughter named Rose Winters, and you must find four different artifacts to recover different parts of Rose Winters' body. So over the course of the story, you get to learn more about his backstory because in Resident Evil 7, you really don't get to hear a whole lot about Ethan Winters. Like, we don't know who he is, where he works, how he met his wife, Mia. We don't know what really happened in the outskirts of the ending to Resident Evil 7. So, with Resident Evil Village, you tend to be a little bit more aware of his surroundings and learning his background and understanding his character a little bit more. And I think when Capcom announced that he was going to be back for the story in Resident Evil Village, I was pretty ecstatic to hear it because I truly felt that Ethan Winters is a well underutilized character in terms of the way that he is solidifying himself as like this, not like a father hero type character, but rather just an interesting plot where we'll get into that momentarily, but the story in Resident Evil Village is not as confusing and not as complex compared to 7, but if you played 7, and you have to understand the scenario that goes right into the development of Resident Evil Village. And I think that the story in Resident Evil Village makes a lot more perfect sense if you have played Resident Evil 7 before, but if you've not played 7 and you just want to get right onto Village, I highly recommend playing 7 first and then you play Village because Resident Evil Village takes place 3.5 years after the events of Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. And I truly feel that the narrative side on Resident Evil Village is severely top notch. I love everything about the game from the voice acting, the character development, the overall atmosphere. Romania is just absolutely gorgeous, probably the most realistic thing I've ever seen on the Resident Evil engine. And I feel like as we talk more about this review spoiler discussion, I feel like Ethan Winters to me was a good character, and I feel like Capcom did their part by giving more of the gamer of who he really is as a character. So I feel like he is the prime example of like how to make a Resident Evil character to become more meaningful and symbolic, and his progression as a whole when you first see him in 7 in comparison to Village, you tend to feel like you're more attached to him. He's more resonant. You feel like he's the type of character that you just want to fall in love with immediately. So I think story wise, Resident Evil 8 Village miles better than 7. And I'm not saying 7 was bad. I thought 7 was fantastic, but overall, I think the story of Resident Evil 8 Village is way on par compared to 7.
Yeah. I will agree, like, for those who's never played a single Resident Evil game and you're interested in playing Village, I really wouldn't recommend playing Village right away. I recommend playing 7 first and then Village, because if you just jump right into Village, you're gonna be like, what I miss, you know? I mean, there is kind of a, what was the word I'm looking for? Like, a summary sort of in the game, but I just feel like it's a lot better if you just play through 7, so you can get like a full understanding of like the experience that Ethan went through in 7. And yeah, but in terms of story wise, I thought it was pretty good. There's some cheesy dialogues, well, specifically in the beginning, like uh this channel that I subscribe to on YouTube, the Act Man. Um, he brought up a point, or like, cause you know how Ethan's like, he encounters Chris, and you know they grab his daughter, and then Ethan's like, you know, like, get your hands off of my daughter, and then literally Chris is like, Ethan, no, like he treated him like a dog, which I, which didn't at the time of playing it, I was just like whatever's, but when he brought it up, I was like, oh shit, you know, that kind of does sound like he treated him like a dog. He's like, Ethan, no, bad boy, stay down.
Sit, sit down, boy.
But yeah. Uh, Also, you remember with the trailers? I think the very first teaser trailer for Village, they teased that, oh, you know, Chris Redfield's a bad guy in this game, which was kind of bullshit because they, I don't know, because I remember in Revelations the weird teaser with Chris in jail. They're like, where they're like pointing guns at each other and all that. I don't know. They always try to like make things a little like I'm not gonna say confusing, but like oh shit, you know, something's bad going down and all that. But when you play the game, it's nothing like that. But Village, I knew Chris wasn't the bad guy, which we'll probably get into later on as to why he did what he did. Um, but yeah, let's just jump right into gameplay wise. I felt like it's a little better than 7, I feel like. There is some new mechanics added into the game, which is, you know, being able to push enemies. And I kind of noticed as I was playing through either the main game or Mercenaries, where you could do like a quick little block and shoot, where you, like, normally you just press L1 to like block, but in this one you could still do that, but if you quickly tap on the trigger button, you could do like a little quick shot as you block. Um, but yeah, those are like the new mechanics added into the game. Other than that, it's basically the same. It borrows some elements of Resident Evil 4, you know, with the inventory and all that, and you know, the merchant, aka the Duke, as he's known in this game. Very mysterious character, but pretty likable. Um, what else? Oh, crafting is also new. I forgot to mention that. You could hunt for animals, and you basically make dishes, which is used to upgrade your health and your speed. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it in terms of like new mechanics for gameplay. Like, what you think about the gameplay? Like,
The gameplay in Resident Evil Village is a lot more fluent in comparison to Resident Evil 7 because when you play Resident Evil 7 compared to Village, the gameplay is very identical and similar to the mechanics used in the RE engine where both games are utilized in. But I feel Resident Evil Village takes more of the toll of borrowing influences from Resident Evil 4, like you mentioned before, with the attached case where you can customize and you can create weapons from like top to bottom, bottom to low, high to mid, you know, horizontally, vertically. And what's really cool about the gameplay for Resident Evil Village, like you've also mentioned previously before, is you can craft items. You can also hunt animals for like health. can do it for ammunition. You can do it for Ethan's endurance, which makes him run faster. You can make weapons modifications, so you can have like scopes. You can have pierce ammo. You can have different penetrated bullets. You can also craft mines, grenades, pipe bombs, just anything that you could possibly imagine. I feel like that's one of the best mechanics about Resident Evil Village is that you have a lot more variety, but it's not as sacred compared to Resident Evil 7, where you have to conserve ammo because if you don't, you're not going to know what the fuck you're going to do. So that's one thing I like about Resident Evil Village's gameplay is that it feels a lot more. It's not as like quick pace in comparison to like 7, but it borrows the tradition formula of Resident Evil 4, and I also kind of get a little bit of vibe of Resident Evil 0 in such a way where you have to like pick up certain items and you have to figure out like, okay, what item is more important? Do I want to keep my first aid spray, or do I want to keep my inventory, like my keys and like your special item? And what's cool about that is that there's also a reward system, and if you complete the reward system in a very long time, you can get bonus points, so you can upgrade more weapons, you can have more ammunition, you can buy modifications to increase your weapons so you can have it more powerful. You can have better recoil system, better reload system layout. And I feel like that's probably one of the best components of Resident Evil 8 is that it feels fresh. And of course, it's played in a first person perspective view, which Resident Evil 7 was the very first main canon Resident Evil game that was featured in the first person perspective view. So, in my opinion, the gameplay to Village is way better than 7. Not saying 7's was bad, it was kind of like Capcom demonstrating, like, oh, we're going to play in first person view, like, how is it going to be in comparison to the older Resident Evil games that were known for its third person, tank control, fixated camera angles. Resident Evil's Village, on the other hand, it takes the same style and format of Resident Evil 7, but they incorporated different elements and structure and a lot more smooth pace in that game. So kudos for Capcom for doing something that's very different that we've never seen Resident Evil game probably since Code Veronica came out.
Yeah. Let's talk about the horror about the game. Was there any scary moments in that game that kind of threw you off?
I think we know what we're going to talk about right now. So um, do not spoiler alert. This is we're going to the spoiler territory right now. So if you don't want to watch this, please look back. Don't look. Don't come any closer.
Or should,
Otherwise, we're going to get sued.
or should we just talk about Lady Dumbatress first because that's what everybody's thirsty for before we jump into the horror part.
Eh, eh. Okay, so
Lady
when
Dematress.
oh man, what a beautiful, beautiful lady she is. 9 foot goddess of just sit on my face, mommy.
the the tall vampire lady, the mommy milkers. Uh, the main Resident Evil character that everybody was just like fucking thirsty for. The memes and
And all
everything.
the memes, the banners, they even made T-shirts too, just to help promote Capcom's sales. Lady
Okay.
Democrescu.
I was gonna say I think we could all agree that she's our favorite in the game.
Well, I wouldn't know about favoritism in terms of the house lords that we'll be talking about later on, but let's just say Lady Demetrescu is one of the most overhyped, commercialized, and seductive female horror characters in a very long time. Like I've never know a character who is 9 feet tall and weighs the equivalent of like three Mr. X's in one, and I'm just like, oh shit, mommy. I mean, she's kind of like that role model you look up to. You're like, mommy, where do vampires come from? Oh, they come from Capcom's Hell Closet, known as Lady Dimitrescu. But she's a very interesting, sophisticated, and yet somewhat attractive character. And I feel like the actress who played Lady Dimitrescu and her daughters when you first enter into the castle, and may I warn you that if you're expecting anything big out of it, you might be a little disappointed because the boss battle with Lady Democrescu, it was a great fight. Do not get me wrong. It kind of reminded me of playing a boss battle from Dark Souls 1. And because obviously they took inspiration from like this supernatural gothic like 16th 17th century aesthetic, and they turned her into this like almost like an entity, like an extraterrestrial entity, where she just has this possessed powers. It's just so unparalleled, and I feel like I wished they would have done more with her story, but I can understand why Capcom was hyping the living shit out of this character, because this was a character that pretty much gained a lot of popularity, a lot of attraction with all the memes and the jokes, pun intended, and the merchandise sales, and people were just pre-ordering because they thought, oh my god, Lady Dimitrescu, she's gonna be the best villain since Nemesis returned in 1999's RE3. No, if you're expecting that, you're going to be disappointed. But
Yeah.
Lady Dimitrescu, Lady Dimitrescu, in terms of like her character and her daughters and entering the castle, I think you will agree with me on behalf of our fans, our friendship and friends. But I think the castle in the House Lord with Lady Dimitrescu and her daughters is the most gorgeous, most environmental and atmospheric places I have ever seen in a video game ever. And this is coming from someone who has been playing Resident Evil since RE2 came out on the PS1. That just the detail and the architecture and the lighting and the sophisticated nature of just seeing these cathedral look like walls. It looked like you're going into a church in like Italy or like Romania or Tasmania or any other country like that. But man, can we just agree that that castle is just so beautiful? Even on my PS4 Pro, it looks fantastic for a game that for a console that's almost a decade old, and it still looks marvelous from a graphical standpoint of view.
Yeah, I believe like what the Resident Evil Village on PS4 Pro runs at 1080p 60 frames or something like that.
Yeah, 1080 60 FPS.
Yeah, cause well, for those folks at home, I played Village on the PS5. Sedition played it on PS4. Whenever I do get around to streaming Village, I basically stream it from Steam PC. So yeah. Well, I bought the shit, I almost fell or slipping away. What? I bought the PS5 version because I basically bought Resident Evil for PlayStation. So whenever there's a new Resident Evil game, I get the PlayStation first, so that's basically my own time to play, and then I'll get it on PC, so I can stream and all that good stuff. But anyways, yeah, let's talk about Lady Democrescu, and I'll give out my opinion on her, which I think she's a great character. Very thick. But I will agree that I wasn't one of those people who was just like extremely disappointed at the fact that she wasn't like the main villain of the game, which is for me when I hear stuff like that from like Resident Evil fans, I'm like, did you really expect her to be the main villain? Like, if you played every Resident Evil game, seen almost every Resident Evil trailers, that Pacific villain you see in all those trailers, they're not the main villain. There's always gonna be like the main villain that shows up towards the end of the game. Because I think in 7 they made it seem like, oh, Jack Baker is the main villain, but he's not. But yeah, if anything, I say that they should have had Lady Dematress as maybe the third Lord. I think it would have been fine. Because they kind of killed off a little too early, I felt like. But I think it would have been better if they switched it out a little. So I think having her as the third Lord would have been fine, and then deal with creepy doll lady first, and then Fishman second. But yeah, I just think it's just weird because um in terms of like villains, I mean, well, because I can't really say like Nemesis is my favorite because I never played through the original Resident Evil 3, but going by the remakes that I played through, I like Mr. X in Resident Evil 2 remake because he was more threatening and scary. You know, you think like you're safe, but then you hear loud footsteps and all that, and you're just like, oh shit, where the hell is he at? Wow, Resident Evil 3 remake is just more scripted. You know, it's not like Nemesis just could just pop up anywhere and all that, which I was kind of hoping for, but that didn't really happen. It was just more scripted scenes where that's where he pops up. But with the village, you get to a certain point where like you think, well, in the beginning part of the castle, you're fine until you you bump into Lady Dematress, you get out, and then I think that's where she starts, or no, that's where because I know you fight one of her daughters, and then that's where she starts roaming around the castle looking for you. So that's where the game gets a little intense because like she's literally walking around the entire castle, except for like the the basement area. That's like the only area she won't be at, which makes sense because she's a very elegant lady, very fancy. I don't think she would want her to get her dress all dirty and all that stuff. But yeah, I will say Lady Dimitrescu is my favorite. I just I like her design. The voice actress that they chose was amazing. She did a fantastic job, which I have still yet. I'm still waiting for my print to arrive, unless because I bought a print, to get it signed from her, but I have yet to get it. But anyways, yeah, I honestly will say that she's my favorite. I mean, Eisenberg is pretty good, but compared to Dumbatress, I like Dumbatress a little bit more. My personal opinion. But yeah, it's just fantastic. Or in terms of like the area that you go to, because you start off in the castle. Love it, beautiful. I just kind of wish that that Lady Dematress was the third. I mean, I'm not necessarily disappointed that she's like killed off a little. I mean, well, she is killed off early, but I'm not like too mad about it. But I will agree that she should have been at least like saved up for later on. But yeah. So I guess we basically talk about both Lady Dimitrescu and the castle. So we might as well jump into the second lord of the house.
So before we get into the second house lord, how did you feel about the Lady Democrescu fight? Did you feel like it was overwhelming at times, repetitive, or just unbalanced?
I thought it was fine. Like it literally felt like something from like Dark Souls / Bloodborne in terms of her design. Yeah, like never had an issue with that. I thought it was fine. I didn't find the boss fight to be frustrating or anything like that. But just overall, pretty good boss fight. Just R.I.P. Lady Dematress.
I've also heard rumors about the DLC that she actually might be one of the selective characters to be in the game, but I believe it when we see it.
Yep, yeah, like there's also well, I feel like maybe Ada might be in the game, maybe because well, I kind of doubt it, but because originally she was supposed to be in Village, like in the beginning part of the game, but she was cut off because I think they said that it just didn't make sense at that time for her just to show up and save Ethan, because like when you play through Village, Ethan gets knocked out by Chris and his men, and then he wakes up like from a car crash. You don't see what happens. You just kind of have to use your imagination in terms of like what the hell happened. I think Ada might have been involved with that, or I believe with the whole lichens scene where you're just fighting hordes of lichens and then you get shot with an arrow and all that, and then they're about to kill you, but then they run off. I think Ada might have been involved with that or something, or maybe it's another reason as to why they run off instead of killing you. But yeah, she was originally supposed to be in the game, but who knows if they'll try to somehow squeeze her into the DLC, but we'll see.
Yeah, I liked her character design for the concept art. She looked like one of those plague doctors you see in the 13th, 14th century with all like that black hooded robe with the menace, and she had this really cool scar on her face, and her hair color was a lot darker. Because in the original game in RE2, her hair was black, and then Resident Evil 4 it was black, and then 2 remake they reimagined and rebooted her, and then she's had that Asian look like character that we all know and love. So if Capcom ever decided to bring back Ada Wong, which you're absolutely right, they should, because she was originally going to be one of the characters from the final game of RE Village, which we'll get into momentarily. But I do agree that they should have done a lot of more with the character for that regard.
Now let's talk about the second Lord, which literally
Wow.
which literally terrified the shit out of me. I never had in terms of Resident Evil and Dead Space, which is like my top horror games to play. I played through from beginning to end with no pauses or anything like that, like no breaks. Or I do get scared if there is a scary moment, but never with Village had it or I encountered a game where I was too terrified to play through because of that fucking giant baby fetus thing. Fucking Resident Evil went full on Silent Hill with that shit. I was like, what the fuck? Creepy ass baby.
Oh man. Um, the first time when I walked into that little mansion, I guess you can call it, and saw the fetus for the very first time, I thought to myself, what am I seeing? Am I watching like Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Sinister or any other more modern horror film that came out after the 2010s era? Like, what am I going to expect? But just seeing all these mannequins and like this dollhouse, it feels like you're walking into this abandoned asylum with all these dark and atmospheric and these frightening lighting effects just waiting to come by, and then all of a sudden when you're in that trap and you see the lights go by and you see this morbid, putrid, disgusting like fetus creature comes out. I kid you not. As a huge survival horror fan, I have never been this terrified since I played Fatal Frame Crimson Butterfly on the PS2 because it resembled that scared factor. It felt like I was playing an old Silent Hill game from the PS2 era, and I feel like Capcom felt like, okay, do you want to be spooky? Do you want to feel like you're embracing your fear? Well, guess what? We're gonna add a giant fucking fetus creature, and we're gonna scare the living shit out of you. And that's just what got me to it. I was almost so scared I literally changed my pants 5 times seeing that disgusting fetus look like creature, and just hearing its cries, it's just so somber. It just feels so depraved. It just feels like ugh, like your shivers down your spine are just like so cold and disheartening. It's just like, in my opinion, probably like one of the best features in the entire game of Resident Evil Village. I'm not gonna say much about the boss fight because I don't technically count that as a boss fight, but the innovation that they put into the in-house lore number 2 is some of the best I've ever seen the series has done in such a long time.
Yeah, that fight was more of a hide and go seek almost.
Yeah, it was kind of like one of those tales where if you read a book, you have to figure out its clue, and if you get it wrong, something's gonna turn, and you have to pay your consequences depending on the decision you make. And I feel like it it didn't penalize you for that, but if you were careful and you learn your strategy within that secondary house lord, shit gets real. It's intense. It's terrifying. It's so bizarre. So I agree.
Yeah, cause like I felt like I was being pressured in that fight, cause like if you don't find the cause you have to find the doll 3 times and stab her 3 times, but you have to find the doll in a specific area, and if you don't find her within the time limit, you basically die. And I was like, ah, shit, I gotta find this fucking doll and kill it. So that basically built up like a little tension there, cause I was like, oh shit, creepy dolls.
It almost reminded me of the movie Annabelle.
I mean, I never seen it, but I know what you're talking about, like creepy doll thing.
Yeah, it's like Annabelle meets Chucky, but more frightening.
Yeah.
But I think overall for House Lord 2, probably the best, probably like the best survival horror esque throughout the entire game. But then we'll continue on later on with House Lord 3, 4, and the finale boss, which I'm really looking forward to talking about because I have a lot to say about this bitch.
Yeah, the second lord, I'd say, or castle lord, whatever, was practically the scariest one in the entire game, and then the rest was scary, but not super scary. I mean, there is some moments, and then there's one part of the game where it just goes on full on action, but we'll get into that after talking about the third lord. Wait, no. After the fourth lord, my bad. But, anyways, third lord, Fishman.
AKA Moreau.
I personally was like whatever's with him. I don't know. Like, he wasn't really like my favorite. It's just he was just there. But you do encounter Chris around that area, and then Ethan finds out that Chris is involved with the case with Mother Miranda, which we forgot to mention. She's like the the leader of the village, basically in charge of the whole village, whatever. She's the big boss, and the four lords basically serve her and all that stuff. So yeah, Ethan finds one of Chris's base, and then he finds out that Chris and his men are involved with trying to find Mother Miranda, and he's trying to figure out like what's their deal with Mother Miranda, because Ethan has to find his daughter. Um, and yeah, but with the third lord, um, wasn't really scary. I will say, like, before you even fight him, the platforming part where you had to like shoot down like certain obstacles so you could build a bridge, and then you had to like lift use like flip switches to raise the bridges or the platforms up, and you had to go quickly, otherwise you drop into the water and the fucking fishman eats you. That part I felt like was a little frustrating because as soon as you get on top of the platform, Ethan moves a little slow. As you know, when he runs, or like he doesn't run. He kind of like moves slow, and that gets a little frustrating because you're trying to move quickly. Otherwise, you just fall into the water and you get a game over. But in terms of fighting him, wasn't too bad. I did die the first time because he started shooting out these acid in the rain. I was like, what the hell do I do? And so I figured out, oh, you're supposed to hide when he does that. But yeah, overall, the third lord was whatever's to me. I don't know. Didn't really care about him that much. What do you think, Sedition?
I hate this boss. I hate this boss because the first time I played him, and I was like, okay, cool. It's this ugly Shrek wannabe looking like creature who lives in a not so swampy infected area swamp. And I do agree with you on this part because when I first got into that segment, when he turns into this gigantic like fish, looked like a shrimp. It kind of looks like a mutated creature where it's like this wide and it's like this long, and I'm just like, cool. Another sea creature that kind of reminds me of El Lago from Resident Evil 4. You know, when you first fight the main boss in Resident Evil 4, it's Leon. But I hate this boss because, like what Blu-ray mentioned before, like if you don't time your platforming and if you don't do it as well, then you will literally die into the abyss, get swallowed, devoured, chew up, manslaughtered to death. And to me, probably one of the most frustrating parts in the entire game. Not because of the way that they wanted to challenge the player. You're like, oh yeah, you know, trust your instincts. We're gonna lower this level to like one color, and then we're gonna do it to another color. And if you don't do it right very well, you're gonna have a hard time going like the left way, the right way, or if you have to backtrack a little bit, push some crates, make sure that the water levels is all fine. But it kind of reminded me of like playing Resident Evil Remastered, where you go down to the mansion basement hall. I think it's the first or second floor, where you have to lower the water temperature, and Neptune starts to come in. And if you don't hit it very well properly, the water will start to evaporate, and then you can literally get sunk into this sunken chamber where you're just basically drowning to death. But this one was more like in the veins of like, okay, you know, time to put your thinking caps on. Or am I going to pull this lever that I can go towards straight the boss, or if I'm going to pull another lever where you have to go into an alternative route? So I feel like this one was more of a challenge, and it kind of felt like a puzzle such a way. It's actually one of the first main puzzles in the game because you have to figure out what your strategy is. Because, like you said before, if you are not timing Ethan properly, and if you're not going there over and over, you will have a hard time and you will die and die continuously over and over again. But the concept of this boss battle is cool. I don't mind fighting him, but I hate the acidic rain showers where if you're not careful enough, you can see Ethan's skin just deteriorating, and you can actually see part of his flesh if you look really carefully, like his hand. And I forgot to mention too that on Ethan's hand, one of his fingers got sliced off from Lady Democrescu. So you can only see part of his index finger and part of his other fingers alongside too, but you can only see like he only has like one full arm where he had hold his gun or his knife, and then his other arm he has to like kind of not apply pressure when you're pouring a first aid spray or if you herb or something like that. So I think this was my least favorite boss in the entire game. Not the worst I've ever fought because I fought way worse bosses in the franchise, but I think overall they could have done a little bit more better with Morel's character. He was cool, but he wasn't the best in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I forgot to mention the somewhat beginning part of the Resident Evil or village where Ethan gets his fingers bitten off by a lichen. That kind of scared me a little bit because I wasn't expecting it.
Almost.
Because I wasn't expecting a lichen from the side to come out and start biting Ethan's fingers. Because you just see the first lichen in front of you, thinking like he's gonna turn around and jump at you, but no, there's another lichen to your side, and he just like bites your fingers off. And then yeah, we forgot to mention that Ethan discovers some weird, or not really discover, because he mainly discovered it in 7, which it's more of a, because my first playthrough of 7, I never encountered this scene where you first had to hide or get away from Jack, and you had to go down underneath the house. If you're not quick enough, Jack will just like chop off your foot, and then he kind of like he basically gives you a healing item. He like gives you a first aid bottle and gives you a chance to heal and run away. Which my first playthrough, I never encountered that scene until like later on, where I wasn't quick enough and he chops off your foot. I'm like, oh, what the fuck? That's new. But basically, on that scene, Ethan discovers something weird. He's all like he was able to reattach his foot just by pouring down the fucking first aid bottle. Because in 7 or in Village, he gets his hand chopped off by Lady Dematress. He had to run away from her, and as soon as you get away from her, he heals his hand like nothing, like it's like normal to him. But you'll end up discovering why he's able to do that. which we'll get into later on. But anyways, let's talk about. So basically, you get three of the parts of Rose, and then
Flask.
the flask. You go into the fourth area where you fight this giant lichen monster, which that area is whatever. So you just fight a giant lichen monster. You get the fourth and final flask, and then you go off to the factory where you meet up with Heisenberg. And when you meet up with him, he basically offers you a deal that he wants to use Ethan's daughter's power to defeat Mother Miranda, but because Heisenberg was basically he had to serve Mother Miranda. He doesn't like her and all that shit. But Ethan's like, hell no, you're not using my daughter for powers and all that. And then you just basically go through his factory, and then that's where you encounter this weird creature thing with the fucking I forgot what the hell is it called, but it has no arms. It only has like the fucking helicopter blades shit thing. I don't know what the hell this is called.
Heller.
There you go. Like the first two times you encounter it, you had to run away until eventually you had to fight it, which was kind of annoying because he ends up eventually starts shooting out like flames at you, and you're just like, God damn it. You have to hide, and you have to like literally go behind him and start shooting out his weak spot. And then eventually, once you beat him, that's where you meet up with Chris, and then Chris basically explains the whole thing as to what the hell's going on, and basically you find out that because Chris in the beginning of the game, Chris and his men kills Mia, Ethan's wife, but then you end up finding out that wasn't really Mia at all. It was Mother Miranda who was able to disguise herself as Ethan's wife. So, what's kind of weird because Chris basically, I understand Chris didn't want Ethan to get involved with the whole situation with Mother Miranda. He wanted to make sure that Ethan stays away from it. But at the same time, I feel like Chris could have told him, like, hey, this is what's going on, rather than just leaving Ethan in the dark and have Ethan thinking, Chris is an asshole for killing my wife and this and that. But, yeah. So, Chris tells him the truth, and then that's where you fight Heisenberg. Got this fucking little machine thing that Chris built. And we get a little reference from Heisenberg saying, like, about Chris punching boulders and stuff.
That made my dude. When I first heard that, I was happy as fuck.
Which I'm like, how the hell does Heisenberg know that Chris punches boulders? It's literally the first thing he sees because his factory blows up, and he's like, "No, my metal armory! I'm gonna kill that boulder punching asshole." But yeah, that boss fight was pretty. I would say it's a lot better than the third one. Yeah, that's just my opinion. Overall with that area, I will say that fucking helicopter monster creature. I literally had a name for it, but I forgot. I mean, there is a name for it, but I literally forgot what the hell is it called. But that was pretty spooky at times because I'm just literally trying to get around through the factory, get some keys, and then I just fucking crashes through the wall and just like, shit, I'm not prepared to fight, so I just literally run away. That's my first instinct. The two times I encountered it, I'm just like, fuck this. I'm not ready to fight you. I'm gonna run away. And then I end up finding out, yeah, you're supposed to do that. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. What'd you think overall with Heisenberg's castle and the boss fight and all that stuff?
Okay, so before I get into this House Lord number 4 with Heisenberg the Dead Factory, I would like to point it out as well too that if you guys have not been following the controversy that's been going on with that particular area, because Capcom pretty much plagiarized one of the actors or movie directors, excuse me, for a movie called Frankenstein's Army, which was released back in 2013, because they stole the original idea of the Dead Factory, preferably the propeller boss battle that Blu-ray is mentioned about, and um, Capcom is in a lawsuit right now because they stole the original idea and concept for the particular enemies in the Dead Factory where you first encounter Heisenberg. And so I don't want to get into this whole debate right there, but I feel like Capcom might just get away because they've stole original ideas in the past, because that's also happened with Resident Evil 4. But about Heisenberg and the Dead Factory, for instance, I just love the Dead Factory so much. It's probably my second favorite area in the game. It might be my first, but of course the castle from AD is like top 5 locations I've ever seen in Resident Evil. So the Dead Factory in the Household 4, when you first meet Heisenberg, it's in this. It kind of reminds me of watching a movie with. It has like this almost a post-apocalyptic approach to it. It's kind of like if you were to play The Last of Us, but it's not as like infectious in such a way where it's not just about, battling fungi monsters or other type of creatures, but you're fighting these mechanical, robotic, combustible enemies that have these drill-like arms, and they have like cycloptic, um, microscopic vision eyes where they can see you in the light of day, and they also have these really cool insignias in their heart where it's made out of metallic iron and heat. And if you shoot them in their heart, you can actually see like they don't function as well. So I like the idea of having different enemies alongside the lichens, and just seeing the overall progression of the game is it just feels surreal and captivating. But as far as the Heisenberg fight is concerned, oh my god, it, my first impression was, am I playing a Resident Evil game, or am I playing like a survival action game that's kind of like not Resident Evil, but it feels like I'm playing like Lost Planet or Dead Space or Alien Isolation. And I feel like the theme for Heisenberg is one of my favorite songs in the entire soundtrack, because I don't know if you played Doom Eternal, but if you listen to one of the songs off the Doom Eternal soundtrack, the fight with Heisenberg, it really reminds me of that industrial kind of like electronic style song from the Doom 2016 soundtrack. And I'm like, oh shit, Resident Evil Village just went full on Doom soundtrack with Heisenberg's theme. And I feel like I can safely say this right now, that Heisenberg is my favorite character out of the four lords. And I feel like with Heisenberg, I don't feel like he was more of a villain. He was more of an anti-hero, because if you read the backlog and the files prior to the original game, he wanted to sabotage Mother Miranda and to basically join forces with Ethan to have Ethan, Heisenberg, and his army of combustible enemies to defeat Mother Miranda to save Romania. Because while we're talking about Mother Miranda in just a little bit, um, Heisenberg to me was one of the most interesting and not as diabolical characters as I thought he was, because I kind of feel moments where I feel sorry for the guy, because he wanted to not only destroy the evidence the and stopping the ritual from getting all the parts for Ethan's daughter Rose, but I feel like you kind of get a sense of Heisenberg being this thought-provoking, very intellectual and very unorthodox character, where you feel like he's not really a bad guy. He feels more like a good guy in a sense, because there was a scene when you first meet him where he asks you to sit down in the chair, and I've always thought like, oh shit, like here's a button prompt, like what do I do? Do I join forces with Heisenberg, or do I want to make Ethan fall down into the pits of hell underneath the soil of the Dead Factory and just find my way out to get the keys and get the fourth Estus flask to help restore my daughter back to life. So that segment right there was just so cool, so intriguing, and I think the boss battle for Heisenberg was probably my favorite boss battle in the entire game. and just seeing Chris making a reference to one of the older Resident Evil games put a warm smile to my face. So I think that part overall was bittersweet, but it was also kick ass.
And now we get to the other part of the game where Ethan encounters Mother Miranda and basically she kills him. And you switch over to Chris, and that's where the game goes on full on action. Um, and then eventually Chris finds Ethan's wife, the real one. And then after that, you, or basically Ethan has a conversation with Evelyn from Resident Evil 7. And then you find out that Ethan's basically been dead. That Jack Baker killed Ethan in 7, which was kind of like, really? I didn't know that. I thought, to me, it made sense that Ethan was infected, but I had no idea that basically Ethan was dead. But somehow the mold virus, whatever, infused with him, and he is able to function normally somehow. Because Chris tells Mia that Ethan's dead, and that she doesn't believe it, and that she basically says that Ethan's special. Somehow she knows about Ethan, like, being infected by the mold. And then, yeah, so that was interesting. And then we get into the final boss with Mother Miranda, which was a pretty interesting boss fight. Dealing with her flying around, and then her and her giant spider legs and all that stuff. And yeah, I thought it was a pretty good boss fight. Kind of annoying a little at times, but it wasn't like too bad compared to the third boss fight. Well, technically not even the third. It wasn't really much of a fight. It was just more the platforming part that was annoying. But yeah, so that's in terms of like the boss fights and all of that stuff. Like, what'd you think about Chris's campaign or part of the game or gameplay, and the final boss with Mother Miranda?
It felt really good to play as Chris Redfield again because Chris Redfield is, of course, my favorite character in the entire Resident Evil lore, and he is one of the original characters that started it all for the franchise. I feel like that segment alone, playing with Chris and kind of learning the backstory about his team, because it feels like, we all know Chris wasn't really actually the villain, because if you see the trailers, Capcom initially wanted him to be like an antagonistic character where he feels like, oh my god, he's gonna transform into this mutated werewolf, and he's going to take control of the virus, and he's going to destroy Romania and all these pharmaceutical intellectual properties in the entire facility of the village where the game is. And I feel like playing as Chris kind of made me feel like a little bit rewarding at times, because I didn't even know at first that Ethan Winters was technically dead, because if you guys play Resident Evil 7, the part where Jack Baker literally says "Welcome to the family, son," and punches him right in the face, and he uses his foot and he stumbles and he hits the part of his brain where he causes a trauma, and that's practically where Ethan Winters died, because he was infected by the mold. And so in the scene where he meets Evelyn in Resident Evil Village, Evelyn tells Ethan that he was already dead and he's never going to be able to see his wife again or his daughter when he's afterlife. And we kind of knew it was coming, because in the trailer it said if correct me if I'm wrong, and it said, if I quote, this is his final story is coming to a close, which a lot of people were speculating that was going to be Chris Redfield,
That's what I
but
thought.
technically, yeah, which I thought too. But technically, it was about Ethan Winters, which kind of made sense, because why would they kill off Chris Redfield after during the events of Resident Evil Village, which we'll get into momentarily speaking. But in terms of the Mother Miranda fight, I feel like she was kind of a very cool concept to fight her, because the way that they utilized her character was very symbolic, very meaning like very mince and very intriguing in such a way where it kind of gave me a little bit of a Dead Space 2 vibe where you fight the final enemy from Dead Space 2. I can't remember what it was called. I think it was oh god, correct me if I'm wrong. It was Isaac's girlfriend, if I remember. She kind of reminded me of that from Dead Space 2, but this one was a lot more intentional. It was a lot more um it was terrifying. It was terrifying just to kind of see that opening scene where she grabs Rose when really it wasn't really Rose, and she wants to use the baby to sacrifice herself to perform a ritual so she can use Rose Winter's entity powers to have her basically corrupt everything from the ground up. But I feel like this fight in particular, when it comes to um, all the side of things, Mother Miranda was very stressful for me because during the part where she's like flying through the air and she creates all these summon fireballs and you have to hide behind like tree root branches and you're like, oh my god, like do I shoot her from the corner, do I shoot her from behind, do I shoot her ahead, do I shoot her horizontally, vertically, like what the hell am I supposed to do? It probably took me like at least 3 tries to defeat Mother Miranda, and after defeating her on the hardest part on the hard mode before he plays Village Shadows, it felt so goddamn rewarding to finally beat Mother Miranda, and I feel like she was probably the second best boss battle, the first being Lady Democrescu. Um, I feel like Mother Miranda was a very interesting antagonist, and she kind of reminded me of Alexia from Resident Evil Code Veronica. If you guys play Code Veronica X, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Speaking of Code Veronica X, happy 20th birthday to Code Veronica that's now 20 years old on the PS2. So what a great way to be a Resident Evil fan. But that's the point. Um, Mother Miranda was a really cool boss battle. I feel like her backstory was very interesting. It was a little disturbing at times if you read the files of her character, but overall, I think the fight was actually well done and probably one of the most experimented boss battles in the series.
Yeah. And now we get to the finale part where basically Ethan is starting to decay because he is infected by the mold after all, and he has his daughter in his hands, and basically he tells Chris to keep his daughter safe while he stays behind and blows up or sets off the bomb because Chris has set up explosive around the village. And yeah, R.A.P. Ethan Winters. And then we get to a part of the game where Rose is, I think, like 16 years old, I think.
17.
16, 17, where she visits her father, Ethan, to say happy birthday. And then she goes back into the car to, I think, to do some training or something like that. I don't know.
But yeah, from what I've read, Chris Redfield's going to train Rose Winters for the BSAA training facility to work with Umbrella, technically.
Well, we don't even know what's going on with the BSAA because as you play Chris, because in 7 he's working with Blue Umbrella, and well, in Normal Heroes DLC, Chris is all like very skeptical with Blue Umbrella because Umbrella originally was responsible for infecting people, so the fact that he has to team up with Blue Umbrella, which was basically ex-Umbrella employees who want to redeem themselves and trying to make things right. Chris is very skeptical. He's like, yeah, I don't know, I don't trust you, but the BSAA basically told me to help you guys out. So in Village, he has his own team. I don't know if it's necessarily working with Blue Umbrella or just completely something else, because he sees a helicopter fly by and he's like, Like, okay, that's kind of weird. Why is the BSAA here? Like, something's going on with the BSAA, like some shady stuff. And then towards the end of the game, one of his Chris's team members, he's all like, the BSAA sent a bioweapon to help out. Like one of the soldiers from the BSAA was a bioweapon, and Chris was just like, okay, what the hell's going on? Like, what the hell is the BSA thinking? So who knows what the hell's going on at that point, like years in the future. So I don't know. Maybe it'll be explained in Resident Evil 9. Maybe, I don't know. But something shady is going on with the BSAA. But
Now, before I go into my own thoughts about the ending for Resident Evil Village, I don't know if you guys have noticed too, but a lot of people were making videos on YouTube about the ending for Resident Evil Village, and I don't know if you've done it, but I certainly have. But on photo mode, if you zoom in at the farthest imagery possible, you can see this man just walking right in front as Rose and one of the security guards is driving her to escort her from paying respects to her father. I don't know if it's a sign that Ethan Winters could possibly be alive, and there's a theory that his story may not become into a terrible end at all because a lot of people are saying that he survived the crash, or something must have really happened when he was infected by the mold, and when he sacrificed uh, his himself to have Chris Redfield protect his daughter alongside Mia. There's been a lot of fan theories thinking that Ethan is alive, or he's just a hallucination, or they're going to be create this mold virus where he could become this doppelganger character, where it's not really Ethan Winters, it's more of a more mortal shell type of character. So, have you noticed that by any chance, or no?
yeah, I saw a YouTube video of it where somebody was able to hack through the photo mode, and as you go through further into it, you basically see Ethan Winters' figure. So it's possibly the Resident Evil 9 might. Well, I feel like it with the ninth Resident Evil game probably will focus on Rose. Maybe, who
Yeah.
knows? I mean, I feel like it's a more of a higher possibility because it seems like so far, with 7 and 8, it's been focused on Ethan Winters. So maybe the ninth one will focus on Rose. Basically, it'll be the Winters trilogy of the Resident Evil. But if there is a ninth Resident Evil game, I want to see some familiar faces. Because, I mean, nothing. I had no issue seeing Chris again and all that, but we gotta show some love to the other Resident Evil characters like Jill, Rebecca, Billy, Ada, Leon, Claire. Like, I want to see how they look years from the future. See how old they look and all that good stuff.
I mean, give or take, I think there's probably going to be at least one or two more games with Chris Redfield, and then his story is probably going to come to an end. But I've also read rumors floating around that Rebecca Chambers might be the possible female protagonist in Resident Evil Revelations 3, or codename, I think it's Outbreak or whatever it is, but that's not the
Yeah.
official name. But I've been hearing rumors that that name in particular. But I do want to see Rebecca Chambers and Jill Valentine. And actually, if you guys have a Twitter account, if you type in the hashtag Bring Back Jill Valentine, there's over 2,500 tweets about Jill Valentine asking Capcom to please bring her back because the last time that we saw Jill Valentine was in Resident Evil 5, and Resident Evil 5 came out almost 13 years ago, and people have been demanding to have her come back at least for one or two more games, and they want Jill Valentine to connect with Claire Redfield because technically those two characters never met in the same parallel because Resident Evil 3 took place a couple of years after the events of Resident Evil 2, and then Resident Evil 2 took place just a couple of years before Resident Evil 3 was released. So I like to see Jill Valentine, Claire Redfield, Billy Cohen, Rebecca Chambers. Hell, I like to see Barry Burton make a return. We haven't seen him since Revelations 2, but unfortunately, I think Capcom pretty much killed off his story in finding his daughter Moira and Natalia of the little girl that he's protecting throughout the entire game. But I think the ending for Resident Evil Village was bittersweet. It was a little emotional for me because I can definitely understand how it feels to lose a father when you were just a little girl and you never met him for the very first time. The ending was kind of a little emotional, but I knew there was going to be a plot twist and I knew there's going to be a cliffhanger because um, from what I've read, I think it was over at Kotaku or some other website where they said that um, Resident Evil 9 was actually in development since early to 2018, and it was going to be the longest gap in any Resident Evil game history. And then we'll probably see Resident Evil 9 come out between late 2023 or as early as 2024. If not, then we'll probably see Resident Evil 4 remake come out between 2024 and 2025. So chances are we can probably see Resident Evil 4 remake come out first before RE9, or we'll probably see RE9 come out around the same time as Resident Evil 4 remake.
I think Resident Evil 4 remake will come out because so far they've been releasing Resident Evil games yearly, but this time with Resident Evil 4 remake, it's not coming out next year because I guess they're trying to work things out with the game in terms of like story wise or whatever. Like, there's just disagreement between the team, so it's getting pushed back into like uh the year after the next year, more likely.
Yeah, and I've read too that Dev One, who did the Resident Evil 2 remake, is also going to be working on Resident Evil 4 remake, which I'm hoping the guy will be turned out really well because M2 did Resident Evil 3 remake, and Peter Fabiano, who used to work for Capcom, said, and quote, that Resident Evil 3 is a finished project. Uh, I disagree because the game is like 60% completed and there's no DLC content, which we're never going to get because Capcom stated themselves that we're not going to get any featured DLC. We're not going to get Mercenaries mode, which I know you and I, Blu-ray, are so pissed off because Mercenaries was originated in Resident Evil 3 on the PS1. So if they do the same bullshit with RE4 remake about excluding Mercenaries, I'm gonna be pissed.
Yeah, because they added resistance for Resident Evil 3 remake.
Fuck Project Resistance. Fuck that.
I didn't even bother with that, but
It, it's
yeah,
it's their way. It's their way of, oh, we're gonna bring the modern day gamers who love Resident Evil Outbreak and Outbreak File 2 on PS2. Why not take the same concept of those games and put it into a blender and make it online only? And they did the same thing with REverse, and now REverse is delayed until next year.
yeah. Honestly, I never even gave a crap about the multiplayer Resident Evil games. I just kind of like my main concern, which is more of please let it be a separate trophy list or a separate, let his own separate game with his own trophy list because I don't want it to be combined with the main entry Resident Evil game because I would have been super pissed. I'd be like, oh great, I'm never gonna plan on this fucking game because of the stupid online shit.
Right.
But yeah, in terms of Resident Evil 3 remake, I feel like a lot of people needs to give up on the whole give us DLC, because it's never gonna happen. It's the story that they told, and obviously you could tell that there is no DLC. Like, no, I don't know. I just feel like because the way they told the story, that's how it is. It's not like something's missing. Like, no, they just cut off a lot of stuff to make it shorter, and there you go. That's your story, and that's it. But yeah, but anyway, speaking of mercenaries, Resident Evil Village has mercenaries, which is a nice return because Resident Evil 3 remake didn't have that shit. But yeah, mercenaries mode. I like it, though could be a little frustrating at times. Well, especially well, it's mainly frustrating for me at one point because of the DualSense controller. Because when it basically has some weight to it, so it basically almost feels like you're actually pulling a gun or pulling a trigger from a gun. So it feels very restricted. So I had to turn that off because like I couldn't tap very quickly or shoot very quickly as I keep tapping it because it just feels like I'm doing this constantly. So
Right.
once I turned that off, everything was smooth. So I was able to tap real quick. But overall, it's a pretty fun mode, even though it's played in first person, but still pretty fun. I don't know what you think about Mercenaries.
It's a nice welcome addition, and as soon as I saw the announcement when they did the showcase this year for Resident Evil Village, and they announced Mercenaries was going to be back, I was jumping on the edge of my seat because it to me Resident Evil is not the same without Mercenaries mode. And to be perfectly clear, Resident Evil 6 Mercenaries is still my favorite Mercenaries in the entire series. I've just had so many great memories playing with that game. It's just a hell lot of fun. But when Village Mercenaries came out, man, oh man, I probably spent more hours on Mercenaries than I've spent on the actual game itself, and that kind of made me crucify myself, and I will never be forgiven for this. So, um, I think Resident Evil Village Mercenaries is a hell lot of fun. I think the most frustrating part is just kind of learning the layouts of the stages and know where the enemies spawn. And if you kill a certain amount of enemies one by one, you get better bonuses. But if you kill them like at a fast time and you get all the power ups, you can get better ranks. And you start off right in the Duke's Emporium where he can give you like a weapon to start, like a handgun, and if you rack up points and get a certain amount of time for like combo breakers and chain breakers, then you can upgrade your weapon to have better firepower, better resiliency, recoil, and all that bullshit. But I think it's a nice mode overall, and I'm actually very curious how the DLC is going to portray it because we still have not heard any word about Capcom releasing DLC content for Village, but I don't think we'll probably get that anytime soon. Probably like
Maybe next year,
before end of,
probably.
yeah, I was going to say like end of this year, maybe as early as next year.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of Mercenaries, in terms of like, because I will agree with you on Resident Evil 6. I spent a lot of time playing that mode in Resident Evil 6. It was just like a whole lot of fun. Like that's a mode I can go back to playing. Oh, in terms of like if I were to happen to play Resident Evil 5 or 6, I will easily jump into Mercenaries mode. I specifically play Resident Evil 6 Mercenaries the most because it's just a whole lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, Mercenaries in this game or in Village still fun. It just gets a little frustrating at times. Well, it's just more of trying to keep up the combo. For me, it was kind of like a pain in the ass because there's a trophy for getting all S ranks for all the stages, which is not bad because you don't have to worry about getting the triple S ranks. But it's at certain times it could be a little frustrating in certain areas because if you're not quick enough, you can, in terms of fighting enemies and killing them quick enough, you just lose your combo and it like could affect your score. But I'm glad I got that trophy out of the way because man, that show's annoying. It was kind of like one of the hardest trophies in the game, but I got it and I got the platinum for it, which I did stream, which Sedition was there to witness.
Yeah, funny enough that you actually said about the S ranks too, because I remember trying to get the 30 combo trophy when you play the first stage, and I surprisingly enough I actually got it on my first try without even trying. Like I'm just rapidly shooting all these Lycans and all the enemies from the castle and the dead factory, and I'm just like, okay, where do I go? Where do I go? And then all of a sudden, I just got the 30 hit combo trophy, probably in like my first try, and I'm like, oh shit, I don't have to worry about that. Now I have to worry about getting the S ranks, which I think I'm like 2 ranks away, and I'm pretty much done for mercenary trophies, and then I'm gonna platinum the game eventually. But I haven't gotten time to play Village around. But I do agree that some part of mercenaries like the stages and the layouts of just racking combos and your power ups and trying to learn the layout is a little bit tedious at times. It can get overwhelming, especially when you're like down to like one or two enemies. You're like wandering the castle, wandering the dead factory, you're wandering around like the village and all of that, and you're like, oh my god, where's this enemy? My time's running out. My rank's gonna degrade. I don't know if you feel that sense of urgency where you're like, oh my god, I have to kill this enemy like right fucking now, otherwise I'm gonna lose my shit.
Yep, that's how I feel. I also forgot to mention, at times it kind of reminds me of raid mode as well from Resident Evil Revelations, mainly because of the health bar on the enemies. That's what kind of
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's what kind of like reminded me of raid mode. I'm like, oh, the enemies have health bars in this one, which makes it a little easier, so you can at least know like when they're about to die. But most times you could just, if you're lucky enough, you could pull a headshot and just kill them quickly. At least
And I like the fact,
with
yeah,
some
and I like
enemies.
the fact, yeah, and I like the fact that they actually add the damage ratio for the enemy. So if you shoot him like in the head, it actually shows you the penetrate damage of each kill that you get, and that's a huge plus on mercenaries for that.
But yeah. There's also bonus content as well that you can unlock using your points as if you complete certain tasks of the game, or you can unlock like certain weapons, or you can unlock infinite ammo, all that good stuff. Which is having unlimited ammo is pretty fun to have. You know, just not having to worry about saving up ammo and all that. You just blast away, kill all these enemies, and yeah. But
It's all about the infinite grenade launcher, especially on Village of Shadows. My God, that's a lifesaver.
I use the Magnum for that. I forgot how I unlocked the Magnum, but the grenade launcher also does help out too. Well, unlimited ammo for the grenade launcher. But yeah, that's our overall experience with the village. We're gonna go down to the rating, the score of what we will give village. What would you rate Resident Evil Village out of 10?
I forgot how stupid we were that we didn't mention the Duke.
Oh yeah, the Duke. Well, he is a likable character, but who does help you out a little bit. Well, in terms of like selling you like weapons and stuff. Like he basically, I forgot to mention, he actually helps out a little bit more with Ethan in terms of like story progression. Like he'll tell you like where to go and this and that. Which Ethan, at first meeting him, he's just like, "Who are you?" Like, you know, you're kind of suspicious. You know, why are you helping me and this and that? Which we really don't know a whole lot about the Duke in terms of why is he helping us or helping Ethan. You know. But what would you think of the Duke?
Very likable character, huge fan favorite, and some of the and we forgot to mention too that he does make a hell lot of references to Resident Evil 4, and that to me I was just crying of joy because just hearing that just kind of gave me a throwback of being 16 years old playing RE4 when it first came out, and when I heard the joke of the Duke saying that to Ethan, I was
Uh,
like, I'm like right on the money, right on the money. Thank you, Capcom, for bringing RE4 references to the game.
yeah, somehow the Duke knows the merchant because he literally says the phrase that the merchant always says. He will say, "What are you buying?" Like literally, the Duke says that, and he's like, "I had a friend. I have a friend who says that." I'm like, "Oh shit." The Duke knows the merchant.
Anything is important. Anything, my friend.
Which they better bring him back. It's for Resident Evil 4 remake. He's got to make an appearance. He has to be in the game. If they remove him, what the hell, Capcom? Like I don't care if it's just. I don't care if it doesn't make sense to like try and fit him into the story or make him more of a important character. Like, cause he's there just to sell you weapons. He's not really there to be like, oh, go this way into the castle and this and that. Which I feel like they might do that, but I kind of don't want that. I just rather have him be there, just be like, yeah, I'm here. You want weapons? I got you.
You want cooking recipes and be on Food Network? I got you there.
Wait, yeah. What would you rate?
Oh,
What would you rate Village?
Before I rate Resident Evil Village, I will say some of the pros and cons I like about the game before I get into the rating. So for the pros, smooth gameplay, amazing visuals, fantastic voice acting, memorable characters, and the setting of Romania is absolutely gorgeous. For the cons, the ending was very predictable. We kind of saw it coming. Some of the bosses can be a little bit overwhelming and repetitive, and I feel like sometimes it can be a little bit linear in a way, and oftentimes, it can kind of punish you in certain ways if you're not careful of what you're actually doing. So, um, for an overall score rating, I'm going to have to give it a solid 9.5 out of 10. I think it's one of the very best games of 2021. And of course, coming from someone who is a huge Resident Evil fan at heart, this is probably in my top 5 Resident Evil games I've ever played in my life. And that says something. And I feel like this game is going to become in the top year contender list for 2021. And I'm very stoked to see what's going to happen with the DLC for Village and what's going to be happening for both RE4 Remake and Resident Evil 9. So 9.5 out of 10. Eventually it'll get bumped to a 10 out of 10 as the making of the stream, but as of right now, 9.5, highly recommended.
Yeah, yeah. I was about to say in terms of pros, which had just literally had in my mind, but I kind of forgot. Oh, there we go. Enemies. There's different types of enemies compared to 7, which was basically the same molded creatures. You got your standard molded enemy, and then you got the ones that are in 4 legs, and then you got this big mold that like shoots out acid, and that's it. Those are your main enemies, which were kind of like, like I wish there was more variants of enemies, but with Village, there is, which I really liked. So that's a big pro for me. Cons, I would just say, a certain part of the game where it could be a little frustrating, like the third lord was kind of frustrating for me in terms of like the platforming, where you had to like flip switches or the levers, and if you're not quick enough, you'll fall to the water and just get eaten by the fish. That part was a little annoying for me. What else? I think that's it for con. I can't really say anything else that I didn't like about the game. But I would rate Village a 9 out of 10. I don't know. We'll see if the DLC could bump it up a little bit higher. And I feel like Village might be Game of the Year contender, because that's like the only game I could think of. But that and Ratchet and Clank are like the only 2 games I see a part of being Game of the Year contenders for this year. Because
I can see that.
Because I can't really think of any other games that are like Game of the Year contenders besides Village and Ratchet and Clank that I'm aware of. That is very popular and making sales and money and all that good stuff.
Yeah. And I've also forgot to mention too that Resident Evil Village actually sold, I think, 3.7 or 3.8 million, which actually surpassed Resident Evil 2 remakes by 1.5 million copies alone. It sold more copies than RE2 remake and RE6 alone in its first 2 weeks, and that just shows how great Village is. So almost 4 million units sold is remarkable. This is the fastest selling Resident Evil game in history since 5, and that says something.
Yep.
So
But
9.5 for me, 9.0 for Blu-ray. If you love 7, please play Village. In my opinion, I think Village is miles better than 7. Not saying 7 is great, 7 is bad. 7 is phenomenal, but Village it's just as better, if not how Resident Evil should be in the first place.
oh yeah, I will say that the graphics for Village is way better than 7 in my personal opinion. At least playing it
Oh yeah.
through PS5. But
Hey, don't mind me. I got a PS4 Pro. It still looks really well on my PS4 Pro though. I mean, I got a Vizio HD TV. It's a 50-inch, and just seeing the scales and the resolution, it looks really well for an older hardware. So it still looks great either way. Like the PS4 version and the PS5 version, it looks fantastic. But the best is the PC. The PC version of Village, just give me my money.
I heard that there's some issues on the PC version, like, in terms of graphics, but I wouldn't know because I mainly played it on my PS5. What's funny too
Right.
is that on my PS5 and PC, in terms of load speed, my PS5 is faster than my PC. I just load up a game, within less than a second, I'm already playing the game. I'm like, oh, okay. On PC, it takes me like maybe like 3 seconds to load, which I'm like, god damn, my PS5 is faster than my computer. That's insane.
Well, I mean, PS5 is technically a PC, but just with not as much GPU.
Yeah. Which I'll get around to playing Village for those folks watching at home. I'll get around to streaming Village whenever I can. It's just work and stuff. As soon as I come home, I just want to relax and play Vigima games on my own time.
Damn it. Bobby, I told you, no video games at the table.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Anything else to add before we end this discussion?
No, really, just thank you for always having me. I always love talking Resident Evil and doing discussions, and hopefully when RE9 or RE4 comes around, probably give my same thoughts as I did for this game, 7 and RE2 remake. So, thank you for having me. I always love doing this, and hopefully you can do more for another game that we like. Possibly, possibly, possibly.
What was that? You cut out right there.
Oh, I was just gonna say, thank you for having me. I always love doing Resident Evil discussion videos, especially just doing stuff like this. And hopefully, if Resident Evil 9 or Resident Evil 4 comes out, we'll definitely do a spoiler discussion again. Who knows? Maybe we'll do one for Dead Space remake.
Guess we'll find out. Which I'm really looking forward to playing through that.
Oh yeah, same here. I'm super stoked. Finally.
Yep. I was like, there's so much rumors about like Death Space coming back. I'm like, you're full of shit. Like, I don't believe it. And so we got the EA play or whatever. They announced it. I'm like, holy shit, Dead Space back. Fucking finally. You fucking bastards. It took us like 20 fucking years. We've been asking for Dead Space, and you bastards finally did it.
It's been 13 years since the original game came out, and it's about damn time we'll get a remake. I just hope EA does not fuck it up because Visceral Games got shut down just years prior after the third game, but I'm afraid that EA might fuck this game up. If they do, I'm just gonna cry like a little wuss and pretend it never existed.
Yeah, well, from what I heard, Dead Space remake is still gonna be. It's gonna stay true to the original game. Well, that's the thing. I'm kind of because the whole remake remaster is always confusing to me because when I think of remaster, I think of it's the same game but with better graphics. When I think of remake, I think of it. It's basically the same game, somewhat similar story, but different scenarios in the game. Or like this, the game takes a different direction in the game. That's not seen in the original game. Like, that's to me a definition of a remake. But games nowadays, they make it a little confusing because it's like, this is a remake. You're like, okay, it's like better graphics, but the gameplay is slightly tweaked to be more modern and this and that. And I'm like, okay, like, I don't know. It's just the whole term is confusing to me. It's like, okay, so like, what makes it a remake? Like, because you're basically implying that the story's gonna be a little different. but you're saying that the story for Dead Space remake is basically going to be the same, but just modern controls. So it's just, to me, I feel like it might as well be called a remaster or something. I don't know. I guess we'll find out more once they show off like another trailer or maybe gameplay of Dead Space remake for me to be like, okay, I could call it a full-on remake, or this is essentially a remaster. Who knows? I don't know, but I'm still looking forward to playing through it because luckily it's not going to be. It's a single-player game with no microtransactions. So, thank you.
And no loot boxes.
Or fucking loot boxes.
Looking at you later, Call of Duty entries.
No, don't get me started on Call of Duty. I am got that new Call of Duty Vanguard. I'm totally skipping. Have no interest in it.
The Battlefield 2042, though, I'm definitely getting that.
I might get it. I don't know, cause it's really hard. Cause with this new Battlefield, it's basically crossplay between PS5, Series X, and PC because of the whole 128 players count. While PS4 and Xbox One players could only play with each other, which I'm like, it looks good. Don't get me wrong. But I'm like, I don't know if I really want to get it because not a whole lot of people have PS5s and Series X. So I'm like, I don't know, fam. I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. We'll see. Unless the campaign is good, maybe. But even then, I'm like, I don't know.
Who plays Battlefield for campaign? I mean, honestly, I do.
But yeah, we got way off track in terms of talking about other video games. But anyways, we're gonna end the discussion right here. Support the boy Sedition. He has his Twitch, Instagram. I'll leave the link in the description since this will be uploaded on YouTube. Anything you want to say before we end the discussion?
No, once again, thank you, Blu-ray, for always having me. I always love doing this with you, especially Resident Evil related. Make sure you also subscribe to Blu-ray's channel and also on his Twitch account. You can also find him on Instagram, not Twitter anymore, but mostly just YouTube, Twitter. Wow. Oh, I'm sorry. My brain is kind of like losing this train of thought right now because I barely got any sleep the past couple of days, so I sincerely apologize. But thank you for having me. Definitely was a blast. Hopefully to do more in the distant future, and make sure to follow me on Twitch and Instagram, same name. And hopefully we can do more of these when the time is right.
Alright, so we'll be ending the discussion right here. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. And we'll see you guys in the next discussion video.